In the winter of 1934, an obscure German archaeologist named Victor Heitz arrived in Luxor under an assumed name. He came not with the blessings of museums or universities, but with a single sheet of vellum, allegedly torn from a manuscript lost since the time of Alexander the Great. The fragment contained symbols that scholars could not trace to any known Egyptian dialect, but Victor believed it was a key to something that predated even the first dynasties. He called it the Cipher of Thoth. The British officials in Cairo dismissed his theories as delusional fringe speculation, but Heitz was not alone in his conviction. A secretive group of mystics and scholars, operating from a lodge hidden in the Bavarian Alps, had funded his journey. They believed that beneath the temple of Seti at Abydos was a chamber not dedicated to any pharaoh, but to a forgotten god, one who had written a book no man was ever meant to read. 3 weeks later, Heitz vanished. His last journal entry, never meant to be seen by the public, was scrawled in a mix of Latin, Greek, and hieratic script. It read simply, "The book is real, but it is not a book. It is a warning." The journal was smuggled out by a Bedouin guide who died mysteriously in a Cairo alley 3 days later. Every photograph taken during the excavation turned black when developed. What exactly did Victor Heitz find? The answer lay dormant for decades until a sealed crate, marked only with the symbol of an ibis over an Ouroboros, surfaced in a London private collection during a disputed estate auction. Inside were a series of sandstone tablets, etched with diagrams that showed celestial alignments far too precise for any Bronze Age civilization. And there, at the center of it all, was the unmistakable symbol of the moon god Thoth, holding not a stylus, but a device resembling a lens or orb. Egyptologists dismissed the tablets as forgeries, but cryptologists from the British Ministry of Defense quietly took the crate and made it disappear. Rumors began to circulate in classified circles about an ongoing project, codename Osiris Echo. Whatever it was, it involved studying lost Egyptian technologies, believed to manipulate frequency, consciousness, and even memory. At the heart of it, the alleged Book of Thoth. One surviving photograph from the crate revealed an object that could only be described as a miniature ziggurat made of electrum, inscribed with what looked like both binary code and ancient glyphs. The implication was staggering: an information storage system thousands of years old, one that fused spiritual ritual with advanced computation. Theories ranged from Atlantean relics to extraterrestrial origins. But none of these speculations were new. In fact, references to the Book of Thoth stretch back into the shadowed recesses of Egyptian myth. The legend tells of a text written by Thoth himself, the god of wisdom and writing. A book so powerful it could grant the reader mastery over the earth, sea, and sky, and even over the dead. Pharaohs sought it, priests hid it. One man, it is said, found it and was cursed to never die. The name of that man was Setne-Kamwas, son of Ramses II. His story was long thought a fable, until fragments of his tomb were discovered in 2008 beneath layers of sand previously undisturbed for millennia. Inside were frescoes showing Setne not as a prince, but as a withered figure chained to a cosmic wheel. Around him spiraled glyphs, not of earthly origin. Every researcher on the dig reported dreams of voices chanting in forgotten tongues. Then, as if drawn by an invisible thread, the Vatican intervened. The site was shut down under the guise of a biological contamination threat. Satellite images of the area were scrubbed from online archives. One member of the excavation team, an Italian linguist named Paolo Ricci, leaked a single page of his notes before vanishing en route to a symposium in Prague. The page included a diagram labeled "Dimensional Geometry of the Calf Field." It suggested the Egyptians were not merely speaking metaphorically when they described the soul's journey across the Duat. They were mapping it. The deeper the story went, the more entangled it became with modern occult movements. Crowley mentioned the Book of Thoth often, but always in riddles. Blavatsky called it the hidden scripture behind all scriptures. And yet the original text, if it ever existed, has never been publicly revealed. Only references, only fragments. whispers echoing through secret orders and forbidden translations. One translation attributed to the book itself describes a mechanism called the spiral eye. Said to be hidden beneath the foundations of a forgotten temple in the Fayum Basin, it was believed to transmit the voice of the stars into human minds during ritual sleep. The temple, known only in apocryphal texts as Perdigeru Serket, was always assumed fictional until radar scans in 2021 revealed an anomalous void below the silt layers of Lake Moeris. The Egyptian government, under military guard, began a discreet excavation. Footage leaked from a drone showed a circular stone gate covered in metallic vinework, unlike anything in pharaonic art. Several symbols matched those on the Abydos tablets once in Heitz's possession, but before any formal announcement could be made, the site was flooded by what was claimed to be a natural seismic event. Satellite data indicated otherwise. In the aftermath, reports surfaced of strange phenomena among villagers in the region. Shared hallucinations, missing time, spontaneous bleeding from the ears during certain lunar alignments. All electronics in the vicinity began malfunctioning. A local boy drew a complex sigil in the sand after waking from a trance. It matched a pattern found on a Babylonian stele describing the Watchers of the Hidden Book. What if the Book of Thoth was never a book in the traditional sense? What if it was a living archive? A resonant frequency encoded in sacred architecture, accessible only through ritual consciousness. And what if modern institutions have been actively suppressing this knowledge, not to protect humanity, but to preserve their monopoly over reality itself? Now, whispers speak of a group operating in the shadows, known only as the Circle of Jed, allegedly composed of former intelligence officers, occultists, and rogue academics. They believe that a full decoding of the book could trigger a planetary awakening, or a cataclysm. Their symbol, a black ibis surrounded by 22 stars, has begun appearing on encrypted forums and ancient artifact heights alike. One intercepted message from the group simply read, "When the obelisk falls, the eye will open, and the voice will speak again." What obelisk, what eye, what voice? Some say they already know where the final passage lies, a scroll hidden within a false wall deep inside the Serapeum of Saqqara, guarded not just by stone, but by something far older. And someone tonight is preparing to descend into that black corridor beneath the sands. But what they will find at the end of that passage is not a scroll, not a relic. It's something that remembers, something that's been waiting, and it has already begun to wake. When the forgotten word is spoken, time shall bend and memory shall weep. Beneath the pale light of a crescent moon, a small convoy of unmarked vehicles moved silently across the desert outside Saqqara. Their destination? A newly unearthed passageway found during a restoration of the Serapeum. Officially, the Ministry of Antiquities claimed the tunnel led to a collapsed grain storage chamber. Unofficially, satellite scans had shown something impossible. An energy signature emanating from deep underground, pulsing in rhythmic intervals like a heartbeat. Leading the operation was Dr. Nassim Idris, a former academic turned covert field consultant. He'd once published papers on Egyptian cosmogony before his work was redacted and classified. Now he wore a different face, a man haunted not by what he knew, but by what he suspected. His team had no idea what they were walking into. All they knew was that something ancient, something forbidden, had been sealed away in stone, and that someone wanted it found again. The passage sloped downward with perfect geometric precision, untouched by the erosion of time. Every 20 meters, a stone relief depicted Thoth not as a scribe but as a gatekeeper. In one panel, he held an ankh made of light. In another, he stood at the edge of the stars, guiding serpents into the mouths of men. These were not metaphors, not here. Halfway through the descent, their instruments began to fail. Compasses spun erratically, radios turned to static. Even digital watches froze, stuck on 3:33 a.m., the same time Victor Heitz's last journal entry was time-stamped. Dr. Idris, skeptical by training but superstitious by experience, marked the time on his notepad. Every anomaly meant something. In this place, everything did. Then they reached it. The corridor opened into a vast underground chamber, its ceiling domed like a womb, its walls lined with sarcophagi that had no seams, no joints. Smooth obsidian, no names, no hieroglyphs, only one symbol repeated endlessly across the chamber. The Eye of Thoth, split vertically down the center as if it were both closed and watching. At the far end of the room, sunken into the floor, was a stone dais. Floating just above it, a black orb, suspended by no visible means, silently rotating. The orb shimmered with internal constellations that changed every few seconds. When Dr. Idris approached, the orb responded. Not to his touch, but to his thoughts. His heartbeat accelerated. Behind his eyes he saw flashes, stars folding into themselves, a library made of bone, a man without a face writing on a scroll of fire. He collapsed. The team carried him back to the surface, but he awoke days later, speaking a language no one could decipher. Linguists brought in from Germany and Morocco couldn't classify it, until one Sufi scholar from Fez whispered a single chilling word, Mitutu, the name of the shadow tongue, an allegedly mythic language spoken before Babel, before time, the same tongue said to be used by Thoth when writing the original book. Meanwhile, across the ocean in Washington, D.C., a sealed document reached the desk of a retired NSA analyst named Harold Quinn. Its cover was stamped with 4 letters, DDJED. He hadn't seen that code name since the Cold War, when he'd been part of a classified task force investigating neurocognitive interference reported near ancient sites. Back then they had believed it to be psychosis. Now the same signal was showing up in satellite data from Saqqara, identical frequency, identical pulse. Quinn contacted the only man he trusted, Father Marinus, a Vatican cryptographer who once decrypted segments of the Codex Gigas. When shown images of the obsidian sarcophagi, Marinus went pale. He claimed they matched descriptions found in the Acta Lux Occulta, a banned 14th century manuscript written by a Carthusian monk after a vision. In it, he described black vessels that carried souls across the dream of the world. At the same time, halfway across the globe, strange electromagnetic disturbances began to erupt near ancient sites, Angkor Wat, Göbekli Tepe, Chichen Itza, always at 3:33 a.m. Local wildlife fled. Migratory birds reversed course. People dreamed of symbols they had never seen before and began drawing them in ash, blood, sand. The Book of Thoth, it seemed, was not merely a record. It was a trigger, a multi-dimensional construct meant to activate when the world reached a precise resonance. Scholars now believed the book was never written with quill and parchment, but encoded through architecture, star alignments, acoustic resonance chambers, and consciousness itself. The ancients didn't read the book. They became it. And yet, the final piece had not been found. According to the last passage whispered by Dr. Idris before falling into a catatonic state, there exists a chamber deeper still. Beneath the chamber of orbs, beneath the black sarcophagi, a vault called Saqqara, the place of the hidden gods, only accessible during Dua Zep Tepi, the inverted hour of the first time, when the star Sirius aligns with the cryptic gate of the Shining Ones. Now a rogue group from the Circle of Jed prepares to open it, among them a defrocked priest, a blind physicist, a former Mossad psychic, and a boy born under the eclipse who has never spoken a word, but dreams in perfect Egyptian. They carry with them a device stolen from CERN, something called the resonance key. It emits the same frequency buried in the Saqqara signal. They intend to descend into Seqer and awaken what sleeps there. But the Vatican has sent their own. And above ground, the winds are shifting. A sandstorm unlike any in recorded history is forming, and within it, flashes of symbols ripple through the air like echoes of a language older than speech. As the two forces converge on the buried chamber, none realize that the book has already chosen its next reader. And it is not human. They will enter the vault before sunrise. But only one will emerge. And they will not return alone. When the book opens, the world will forget its name. The storm arrived before dawn, not as a natural phenomenon, but as if conjured by the will of something buried deep within the earth. The winds screamed with a pitch that rattled bone and scrambled radio signals. Sand danced like smoke, forming brief fractal shapes. Eyes, spirals, symbols no living script had ever captured. Time itself felt disjointed, thickened, as if the air had been bent. Above the Serapeum, all operations halted. The Egyptian military pulled back. Their instruments failed. Several guards refused to enter the area again, claiming to hear voices in the wind, speaking to them by name. And below, in the black tunnel leading toward the chamber of the hidden gods, the rogue team known only as the Circle of Jed pressed forward. They passed the threshold that had remained sealed for over 12,000 years, marked by a door of meteoric iron, smooth as glass and warm to the touch. The blind physicist, Dr. Rami Noor, led the way. Though his eyes were useless in the darkness, he claimed he could hear the geometry of the passage, not with ears, he said, but with my blood. Behind him, the boy, called only Amun, moved without hesitation. He had never spoken, but his presence commanded silence. His steps were precise, calculated, as if he were remembering the way, not learning it. His bare hand touched the walls, fingers following etched sigils that lit briefly under his skin's contact. The sigils responded to him. The passage narrowed, then opened into a spiraling chamber carved from a material no one could identify. Blacker than obsidian, smoother than glass. Light didn't reflect, it sank. The chamber pulsed with a low, constant vibration that couldn't be heard, only felt. The resonance key, attached to Noor's chest, began to activate. Symbols rose from its core, spinning in holographic precision. The group formed a circle. Each one placed a drop of their blood into the center groove. The groove accepted it, drinking the sacrifice, and then split open. Beneath them, a staircase descended, not physical but seemingly made of layered light and shadow. It responded only to those who had given their blood. Any hesitation caused the steps to dissolve into void. Two team members who turned back were simply gone. Not a sound, not a trace, just silence. When they reached the bottom, they stood before the vault. It was spherical, immense, carved from a single stone, suspended in space. No floor, no ceiling. Gravity bent strangely here. Their feet floated inches above the surface, and yet they could not fall. A glyph hovered in the center, an eye within a spiral, surrounded by 22 constellations that matched no modern chart. And in the middle of the glyph, a pulse. It lives, it waits, it listens. Dr. Noor placed the resonance key against the vault's heart. Instantly, the chamber reacted. The stone rippled, becoming translucent. Inside, they glimpsed a figure, neither human nor beast, neither flesh nor machine. It sat in lotus posture, unmoving, as if meditating across time. Its skull was elongated, its face masked in gold, its chest glowing with a complex rotating mechanism. In its lap, a tablet made of living light. The boy stepped forward. The vault opened for him alone. He entered, and as he did, the glyphs across the chamber shifted. They rearranged themselves into a map, not of Earth, not of stars, but of something deeper, consciousness, the mind as temple, the soul as architecture. The Book of Thoth was not just a message, it was a mirror, a guide to rebuilding reality itself through the observer's perception. Then Amun touched the tablet. Flash. For a brief moment, every member of the circle saw something different, a forgotten memory, a lifetime not lived, a death not yet experienced, and a voice, not external but internal, spoke a single phrase in perfect silence. One woman screamed and vanished. Another began speaking in a tongue that matched no human phonetic structure, nor fell to his knees, weeping, not from pain but from awe. "I see the architecture," he whispered. "I see the code behind the veil." But then the voice spoke again, this time not to their minds but to the world. The storm outside stopped. Globally, satellites blinked out. For 0.33 seconds, clocks glitched, one recorded time reversing. On social media, a video surfaced briefly before being scrubbed. A child in Mozambique, drawing the exact glyphs from the Serapeum chamber in the dirt, blindfolded. Laughing? Father Marinus, thousands of miles away, fell to the floor of his cathedral as every candle blew out at once. He scrawled one sentence in his journal before blacking out. The book has begun to write again. And in the Pentagon, Quinn received a call from an untraceable line. A digitized voice spoke. "Seker Neteru has awakened. Containment failed. Phase 2 begins." But Amun, still inside the vault, stood now face to face with the ancient figure. Its eyes opened. They were not eyes. They were galaxies. And it spoke without speaking. "You brought me back." The vault trembled, not from instability, but from choice. The being, the scribe, the architect, the forgotten one, offered Amun the tablet. The moment he touched it, the chamber shifted. Stone became thought, light became memory, time inverted. And outside the vault, Dr. Noor whispered, "He's not Amun. He never was. He's the echo of the first time." The storm began again, but now it wasn't sand. It was memory. Rain made of forgotten truths, ashes of futures that never came to pass. People began dreaming in glyphs, speaking in languages they had never learned. The stars shifted subtly, realigning to a geometry only the ancients once understood. And at the edge of the Saqqara sands, something else emerged. Not a structure, not a being, but a signal, one that began to transmit itself into machines, dreams, water, and silence. The Book of Thoth was never meant to be read. It was meant to be reborn. And now it was rewriting everything. But something else had awakened with it. Something that had followed the signal from a place before stars. Something that had waited for the book to open, so it could return. And deep beneath the earth, in the last chamber not yet breached, a second vault began to hum. And this one was not waiting to be opened. It was waiting to break free. The humming grew louder. Not as sound, but as pressure, like the atmosphere itself had grown dense with some invisible force. In the depths below the Serapeum, beneath even Seker Neteru, the final vault began to stir. Where the first chamber had welcomed, this one resisted. Its walls sweated with condensation, though no water existed there. Its surface cracked with fractal patterns that shimmered like heat mirages. And inside, something began to knock. Not with fists, but with time. Above the world shifted. People who had touched the glyphs, online, in dreams, or even in replicated carvings, began to change. Not visibly, not immediately, but subtly. They started to dream the same dreams. They spoke in unison in moments of trance. They began building small altars, stone arrangements, spirals of salt. And always, always, they spoke of the voice beneath the page. Across the planet, seismic sensors recorded faint pulses at regular intervals. Not tectonic, rhythmic, they matched the Fibonacci sequence, and over them all an encoded signal layered in electromagnetic noise. It was as if the Book of Thoth was broadcasting again, this time globally, and it was rewriting not history, but reality. In the Vatican archives, Father Marinus uncovered a scroll locked in a lead case marked with a singular warning, Limen Deingi non transire, do not cross the threshold of God. The scroll spoke of the second vault, the prison of the name-binder, an entity not divine but pre-divine, something that existed before language, before separation. The moment the first word was spoken in creation, it was locked away, because that word created it. Meanwhile, Amun had changed. His skin shimmered faintly under ultraviolet light. His pupils no longer dilated. He no longer required food or sleep. He sat within the first vault, still holding the living tablet, as if in communion with something no one else could perceive. The others had left him, terrified. Dr. Rami Noor remained, but he kept a distance, muttering fragments of formulas that couldn't exist. Four-dimensional sound geometries, inverse entropy pathways, quantum soul display. The circle of Jed was no longer whole. Some had vanished, others had gone silent, and those still alive were dreaming of the second vault. Always the same image. A being of shifting limbs and unfixed identity, trapped in a loop of mirrors. Its mouth was a spiral, its eyes were blank, and in every dream it whispered in a voice that reversed itself as you heard it. The book was changing them. It wasn't meant to be read, it was meant to be opened. A circuit, a lens, a resurrection engine. And now the second part was awakening. But no one knew how to stop it. Far below, in the dark where no light was ever meant to touch, the prison stirred. Its walls bore no glyphs, no names, because to name what lay within would bring it into being. It had only one seal, the symbol of erased memory, a circle struck through by a crooked line, the mark of the unwritten. And the seal was now cracking. Across the world, anomalies escalated. Children drawing spiral glyphs with their eyes closed. A woman in Kyoto began speaking Sumerian despite having no knowledge of it, and accurately recited lines from a lost temple inscription known only to 3 people. In Antarctica, an ancient metal disc buried under the ice began vibrating for the first time in 9,000 years. Then came the final transmission. From an unknown origin point deep within the Earth's crust, a signal burst across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It lasted 3.33 seconds. Every computer turned on recorded a single line of data, regardless of firewall or power source. It read, "The inheritor has been chosen." Amun rose. He walked out of the vault for the first time in 4 days, barefoot, unblinking, unchanged, and yet completely other. Noor fell to his knees, unable to speak. Amun placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered a phrase that caused Noor's pupils to dilate until they turned fully black. "The last glyph is a door, and I am the key that never forgot itself." The book had not merely been opened, it had been translated. Amun was not reading it, he was now living it. He was its extension, the final chapter that had not been written, because it was meant to be walked. And the second vault heard him. Beneath the world its prison cracked open, not with sound, but with forgetting. All at once, people across the world paused, mid-sentence, mid-movement. Some forgot where they were. Others forgot who they were. A mass forgetting swept the globe like a shadow that left no cold, just emptiness. And in the center of that emptiness, something smiled. Governments scrambled. The Vatican went dark. CERN initiated full lockdown. And in orbit, the ISS recorded an unknown structure slowly forming from ionized particles over the Earth's magnetic pole. A floating glyph, enormous, luminous, and unmistakably the symbol of Thoth. But this time it blinked, once, as if acknowledging someone watching. Now Amun walks. Across lands, deserts, temples, glyphs bloom in his footsteps, the book writes through him. And those who see him, even for a moment, remember things they should not know. Ancient cities, stars that never were, names of gods who were erased. And he is walking toward the second vault, toward the thing that calls him. And as he nears the threshold, the glyphs spiral around him like wings. The stone begins to open. not outward, but inward. The vault does not open to a room, it opens to a mind, a singular, ancient, unspoken consciousness, and it remembers everything we tried to forget. When the book writes the world, who will write the book?